This is podcast number 5. What is an individualized education plan or an IEP?
Okay, first question, what is an IEP?
So the purpose of an IEP is to lay out the special education instruction, supports and services a student needs to thrive in school. It's more than just a written legal document. We like to refer to it as a map that lays out the program of special education instruction, supports, and services kids need to make progress and thrive in school. The IEP is covered by special education law, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. They're created for eligible kids who attend public or charter schools, which includes charter schools. Sorry. IEPs are part of the pre-K through 12th grade public education. So with this IEP, we've had the ETR meeting, and now we're taking all that data and creating goals for the student. We're creating specially designed instruction, accommodations and modifications. Mm-hmm. This is going to map out what's going to be done during the course of this IEP. And where I had mentioned before that ETRs are every 3 years, IEPs are done every year. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to be done before they expire on that date.
Okay, what are the components of an IEP?
So there are many components to an IEP. Here in Ohio, we have 13 sections to our IEP. So our first section is the future planning. You talk to the parent, find out what the parent, goals for their student are, what the student's seen as well. Mm-hmm. Our section 2 is questions that ask about behavior, adaptive living, communication. You just check yes or no. And if you check yes to any of those questions, then there has to be a goal associated with that section. Section 3 is the profile. This is where we're going to take the information from the ETR, put it in there, but we're also going to get some background information about the student. Where the student attended before, if this isn't their first school, getting some teacher input as well. We try to find some positive things from the teachers mm-hmm. to put in this section, because the parents are going to hear what they deem as mostly negative or struggles. So we want to put some strengths or some positivity in there at the profile. We also outline any absence issues that we're seeing, any medical information, whether the student has asthma or maybe they're on medication that they need to take, any safety concerns. There are students who have disabilities so severe that they do have outbursts, and we want to outline that so that we can make sure we have the appropriate people trained on crisis prevention intervention training, which is kind of restraining a student, mm-hmm. but it's the proper way of doing it. And then we move into what we call Section 4, which is the extended school year. Summer school does not count as an extended school year. Extended school year means you're providing services specifically per the IEP. It takes a lot for there to be extended school services during the summer. So typically we write no on those. The major parts, which I'm about to get into, is the Section 5, post-secondary goals. This is important for your students who are 13 and over. Mm-hmm. We are required to make sure that we are starting transition planning for once they graduate high school. So this is having them research careers that are interest of them, jobs that are interest of them. Do they want to go to college? Do they want to go to vocational training or vocational trade school? What do they foresee after high school? And you have to do this every year after they turn 13. So let's say you have an IEP for a student who's 12, but in the course of that IEP, he's going to turn 13. Mm-hmm. You need to include the post-secondary goals because he's going to be 13 in the middle of it. So making sure that's done. It also puts their expected graduation on there, so that we know that that's the graduation goal we need to reach. Then following that is what I call the academic goals, or the Section 6. This is where the reading, math, writing, speech, OT, like any goal that you have for this student is in this section. And in this, you're going to put their present levels of performance. So if Timmy is a 10th grader and he's performing on a second grade reading level, then you put that in there. We want to make sure that we have their current grade as well as where their reading grade level is at. We also, this is where we put the annual goal. We write SMART goals, meaning the who, what, when,
Right.
and how. You want a goal that has what their accuracy is going to be. So is it going to be 80% accuracy or 75%? And how many times they're going to do it. Is this going to be in 2 out of 3 trials or in 4 out of 5 trials? And then you want to put when the goal ends. So typically most IEPs are written that the goal is going to be by the end of the IEP. And then we break that goal into objectives. And in those objectives, we write the goal and we get more specific on what they're going to be working on. So like for reading, it may be, if it's reading comprehension, it may be they're going to increase their reading grade level from 2nd grade to 5th grade. And they're going to do this by answering who, what, when, why, how questions, or they're going to answer questions about details or main idea to help build those reading comprehension skills. And then we also put in there when we're going to do progress reports. If you have a goal, you have to do a progress report with it for however long you put in there. Typically for us, we do progress reports at the end of the quarter. Because not only are we putting in there about the goals, we're also putting in there how the goals are related to their grade and what their grades are. The other next section that follows the section 6 is section 7. And this is kind of broken into like 3 parts. The first part of section 7 is the specially designed instruction. This is how much the intervention specialist or the SPED aide is going to be working with that student per week or month or daily. Those are typically how that specially designed instruction work. So for some students, it might be 30 minutes a week. Some it might be 30 minutes daily. But that specially designed instruction focuses on what the intervention specialist or aide are working on per the IEP goal. That's not classroom work, that's goal work. We're trying to relate the goal to the classroom work. Following that, we have the accommodations and the modification part of section 7. The accommodations outline the frequent breaks, the extended time, the use of a calculator, clarified directions, if they get graphic organizers. Modification part is when we are modifying the curriculum for a student. Now, every student doesn't need modifications,
Right.
but if they do, that's where they're going to get it. That's where we'll modify, if it's a worksheet with 20 questions, they may only have to answer half of that and do 10. Typically, the modifications are in 25%, 50%, or 75%, depending on the cognitive severity of the disability. Also, this would where we would modify grading scales. Not everyone gets a modified grading scale, but there are, depending on the cognitive severity of the disability, that's where we might decide, okay, instead of being on a 10-point scale, we're going to make it a 15-point scale. Following the section 7, we have section 8, which outlines transportation. And that's where we outline whether a student needs special transportation or not. Do they need to be on maybe a van instead of a bus, or do they need curb-to-curb service? That's where we're going to outline that. Section 9 outlines extracurricular activities. This is where we're going to say if the student needs any accommodations with that. All of our students can participate in extracurricular activities, but they may need some accommodations, and there may be something where we have to excuse them from gym class because of a physical disability. That's where it's going to outline there. Section 10 is a bunch of questions that are asking if we've taken in the strengths of the student. You want to make sure you're answering yes to all those questions. If you've answered no, then you need to go back and do something to make sure you get a yes on that question. Section 11 is the least restrictive environment. Is the student attending a school they would attend as their typical peers? Are they in the general education classroom? You can put in there that you're doing a resource room from the general education classroom, as long as the parent is okay with that. And then we have Section 12, which is another big section. This outlines district and state testing. So district testing is like our Renaissance testing. For the high schools, when we do ACT testing, they get accommodations for those. So we're going to outline all of that in the district testing. State testing is the Ohio State test for K through 8, and then the EOCs, or end of common year exams, for the high school students. Every test that they possibly could take for those is going to be listed with their accommodations, so that there's no confusion on whether they get accommodations or not for that test. That leads into the Section 13, where we can excuse students from the consequences. So we can excuse them from the consequences of the third grade guarantee, and we can also excuse students from the consequences of not passing the EOCs. This is not something that we just do for every student with disability. There has to be certain benchmarks and guidelines that they have to meet, because if we excuse them from, especially high school students, if we excuse them from the EOCs, they don't get a diploma, a typical high school diploma. They get a certificate that says they completed their high school years.
Right.
So luckily the state of Ohio has come out with those graduation seals, and we have academic advisors for our high school students that can outline those graduation seals, and I encourage parents and students to make sure they're talking to those academic advisors, so that we can do that pathway instead of excusal. And then after that, it's just a bunch of signature pages for the IEP.
Okay, how's the information shared with all the school staff?
So we do not give copies of the IEP out to all staff members. It falls under that FERPA. They get to view the IEP. They can come in to their SPED aides office or their intervention specialist office, and they can view the files in the office. We just don't pass out multiple physical copies to protect that confidentiality. Right. But we do make sure, right now we are currently sharing the Section 7s from the IEP, and this is that specially designed instruction, the accommodations and modification page. We are transitioning into using IEP at a glance, which would be more detailed, letting the teachers know the goals. This is all done through our Google Docs, and they can then go in and see those. But while we are transitioning to those IEP at a glances, we are providing the Section 7s for the time being.
Okay. So who should be involved in the building and the meetings of the IEP?
So it's similar to the ETR. The parent, the intervention specialist, the school psychologist, the general education teachers, your service providers, your speech pathologists, your occupational therapists, physical therapists, and the district rep. And just like with the ETR, if it's an initial IEP, everyone has to be physically present for that. If it's a renewal, you can, like I said, be a little more lax and do a phone conference and agree via the phone conference, or you can you can have the phone conference and then get confirmation through email or text. That's really up to the intervention specialist and the parent how they want to do that. But for initials are the most important. Well, everything's important, but it's most important that you're at those meetings in person, because if you're not and we don't have a physical signature, then we can't move forward with services.
How's the IEP implemented?
So the IEP is implemented by the intervention specialist and the SPED aide.
Right.
Their service schedules created based off of the specially designed instruction, and that service schedule can be whether they're pushing into the classroom or they're going to pull the student out for small group or one-on-one, where they're going to work on the goals. We do try to tie in the goals into what they're doing into the classroom so that it's encompassing everything in the student's life. But sometimes, depending on where how bad the deficit is, it may need to be just focusing on the goals during that service time. We do encourage teachers to ask their students to see their intervention specialists or SPED aid. We also do ask teachers not to say anything that would make the student feel less than, or in the student's words, stupid or dumb.
Right.
Don't say go see your special education teacher. Try to
Right.
use code words, or, instead of saying go see your special education teacher, why don't you go see Miss Miller?
Mm-hmm.
Miss Miller needs to talk to you, or something like that. So that's how we kind of implement all that.